Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using some products that I love. I love to use distress inks for backgrounds and stamping and Copic coloring, so it's just going to be an awesome card. I'm starting out by stamping the little fire from the Paper Smooches Happy Camper stamp set onto a piece of distress watercolor cardstock. I'm using my Tuxedo Black Memento ink. It's not really going to matter, and it doesn't have to be stamped perfect because I'm going to be covering it with another stamped one. You'll see what I mean in the end. I'm using my Fossilized Amber Distress ink and the Spiced Marmalade and adding a little bit of yellow and orange kind of shadow around that fire to make it look like it's glowing. And then for the rest of the background, I'm going to be coloring that in with the Chip Sapphire. So I'm using my blending foam tool and I'm just coloring in that entire background. Again, I'm going to be adding multiple layers, so this first couple layers don't have to be perfect by any means. I'm then going in and adding some of the hickory smoke just to get that little bit of darker gray look, even though most of that is going to be covered up with the black soot, which is my next layer. So I'm just adding this black and I'm going over the entire piece of the Chip Sapphire that I did. I'm leaving that circle though still around the fire so that is still that yellow-orange color. And you can add as much or as little ink as you want. So I'm just trying to add enough so that it is a dark sky. And then just to make sure that it's not completely black, I'm going to go back over again with that Chip Sapphire just so that it's a really, really dark blue color and it's that night sky. So then I'm going to go back over that yellow circle with some more of the Fossilized Amber. And you can see I did go over the black soot and the Chip Sapphire a little bit. So I'm using some white acrylic paint. This is from Ranger, I believe. You can use any white acrylic paint, even from the craft store that's like less than $1. But I'm just putting a little bit onto my nonstick craft sheet, and then I'm going to spritz it with water. Quite a bit of water because I want it to be really liquidy so that I can flick it off from my paintbrush. If it's too thick, you'll get big globs of paint on your project. So I'm just mixing it up, making sure that it's really, really liquidy. And then I'm taking my paintbrush and just flicking it onto there so it looks like stars that are in the sky. You can also do this technique to make it look like snow in the background for winter cards. So I added a little bit more water because the drops were a little bit too big. But I'm just going back in, and if you do get spots that are too big on there, what I did is I just took my cloth and then kind of tapped it up. Even though it's quite large, if it's still faded, it will look like a star that's way off in the distance. So you just kind of have to make your mistakes work sometimes on your cards. Once I'm satisfied with the background, I'm going to set that aside and then let it dry completely while I work on the rest of my card. I'm going to go ahead and stamp the fire again with my Tuxedo Black Memento ink on a piece of Coordination's 110-pound cardstock. I'm also going to be stamping the bear that's in this image. Once I stamped these, I heated them with my heat tool just to make sure that all of that ink was completely dried before I started coloring them in with my Copics. So for the fire, I'm starting with the Y15 and I'm coloring in the entire background or the flames of the fire. That's just my base coat. I'm going to be adding some other colors and blending them out. Next, I'm using the Y38, which is kind of more of a golden yellow. It's a little bit darker, and I'm just adding little bits of this into that fire. Obviously, it doesn't have to be perfect because every fire is going to look different, so yours will look different than mine. And then I'm using the R29 to add little bits of red into there because I really want that orange, yellow, red fire. I even drew in a few just random little lines. And then I'm blending that with the Y38 and the Y15. So then I can go ahead and color in the logs. I'm using the E74. So I'm going to keep it pretty simple for the bear. So for the snout, I'm using the E21. And then I'm going to use the E23 just to flick a little bit of color in from the edge, just to make that part a little bit darker. And then I'll blend that out with the E21. For the bear's body, I'm using the E23, and I'm coloring in the entire body. It's quite a bit of ink, and it's definitely not going to look perfect on the first try. It's going to be really streaky. But the more color and the more layers of color you add, the more smooth it will look. Next, I'm going to take my E25 and just add in a few shadows and then flick it kind of from the back. And I like to go over it a few times just to make it really dark. And then once again, I'll take that E23 and just blend that out. So add lots of color on there, and you can, even on the second layer, if it doesn't blend out, just keep adding more and more color on there, and it will help blend that color. Once I was done coloring, I went ahead and fussy cut them out, which just means I cut around the edge. I die cut 2 pieces of grass using the Lawn Fawn border die. And I just used, it's kind of an ugly green color, but I'm going to show you how to change the color on that. I'm taking my powder bag and just wiping over one of the pieces of grass, and I'm going to heat emboss my sentiment. So I'm using the one that says Bear Hugs. I'm going to ink this up with my Versamark ink, and then stamp it right into place. And then I'm going to add the Hero Arts white embossing powder. So I'll go ahead and cover that, and then tap off any extra, and then heat emboss that with my heat tool. So I don't really like this green, and I want it to be a darker green since it's a night scene. I'm taking my Forest Moss Distress ink and just going over both of those grass die cuts. So that's going to make it a lot darker, and it's going to kind of hide that ugly green color. So if you have pieces of cardstock that you don't like, you can always change them with your distress inks. And I think it even kind of gives it that cool look, because it's different than adding the distress ink to a piece of white cardstock, because it still has that green kind of undertone to it. So the reason that I heat embossed that sentiment was so that I could go over it with the distress ink and it would resist it. You can always color your cardstock before you die cut it, but I didn't quite know where to stamp my sentiment, so that's the reason that I die cut it first. I'm going to go ahead and start assembling my card together. First, I like to go around my stamped edges with the Memento Tuxedo black marker. That way it just kind of makes it look complete, and you won't see that white border on the edges. So even if you do mess up fussy cutting, it kind of hides all of those mistakes. And I already did do that on the fire. I have a piece of black cardstock that measures 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I'm just going to mat my distress ink piece onto that. And then I can go ahead and place that down onto my white A2 size card base. First, I'm going to glue down my fire. So I'm using my multi-medium in the matte finish. I'm just adding a little bit of liquid adhesive to the back. And then I'll place that right over my stamped piece. So like I said, it didn't have to be perfect because I'm going to be covering it up anyway. And then I'm going to cover that with my Wink of Stella because I really want it to look sparkly and really have that shine to it. Next up, I'm going to adhere my grass pieces down. So I'm just going to add a little bit of adhesive to the back of those. The first one I lay down, I'm going to move it slightly up so that I'll have room to add the bottom layer. That way I can add it directly onto the bottom of that distress ink piece. And then to adhere the bear down, I'm using my 3D foam squares from Best Creation. I'm using the larger ones and I'm just adding some to the back. I'm going to place that down right above my sentiment. Now it's time to add a few finishing touches. So I'm going to add glossy accents to the bear's eye and his nose. I always think it's fun to add a little glossy accents to the critters to make them look just a touch more realistic. And then I'm going to take some Star wood veneers. These are from Studio Calico. Honestly, I'm not sure if they're still available, but if they are, I will link them down below with all of the other supplies that I use on this card. I have all of my wood veneers in this little container. So I'm just going to pull out a few of the stars and scatter them in the background. That'll kind of help show what those white splatters are supposed to be instead of looking like snow. It'll just kind of pull the card together and make it look like a night sky. So again, I'm using my multi-medium in the matte finish to adhere down all of these stars. Just adding a little dot and then pressing the wood veneer into place. It's a really strong adhesive, so it does hold these wood veneers quite well. And then that will be my finished card for today. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure that you're subscribed to my channel if you're not already. And I will see you all back here next time. Bye everyone!